It's a tricky thing making a sequel to a beloved game. People would want more of what they liked about the first game, same as game 1, only bigger and better. But if it's just more of the same, it can feel a bit disappointing. The best sequels manage to iterate upon the gameplay ideas and themes of the original, an evolution of what had been expected from the series, hitting a delicate balance between being familiar enough to feel consistent but different enough that it feels fresh. Silksong is that game. There will be spoilers ahead for all of Act 1 and spoilers for many of the areas of Act 2. But I won't be spoiling any of the main bosses of Act 2.
Yanara.
Pharloom is a land of devotion and faith, a land where bugs from far and wide gather to make their holy pilgrimage towards the gilded peak of the Citadel. But it's also a place that is haunted by an infection of silk. Silk, which descends from the top of the Citadel, has entered the very core of many of the bugs, turning them hostile but still duty bound. They keep the Citadel ticking even as their sanity slips away. And wherever the world isn't populated by haunted citizens of the Citadel, wilderness has overtaken the land. It makes the world of Pharloom a dangerous place. And it soon becomes clear that Pharloom's deity isn't benevolent enough to actually aid the pilgrims on this perilous journey. Being allowed to make this pilgrimage is gift enough, and the pilgrims consider the harshness of the climb one of the reasons that there must be salvation above. But for all that start the climb, no one ever seems to make their way back. Much has been said about this game's difficulty. I consider Silksong's difficulty to be well calibrated for the world it wants to portray and the scale of the challenge Hornet faces in the course of the game. Because the challenge is part of the artistic expression of this game, it's told to the player time and time again that it's a treacherous journey to the Citadel, and it's a world where the inhabitants barely survive. The difficulty is one of the tools used for crafting this experience. It doesn't need to justify itself beyond that. Trained by being trapped inside a cage for a long time, Hornet starts off her journey severely weakened and has almost no resources, mirroring the average pilgrim that is trying to make the climb. Even the benches in this game are often paywalled behind rosaries, the currency in Pharloom. Pretty on the nose that the richer you are, the more devout you are. It's particularly hard trying to gather any decent amount of rosaries early on. The haunted pilgrims and workers of the Citadel barely have any rosaries of their own. And whatever you do collect, you better keep it safe by tying it into a string, or you might not even be able to rest at the benches. Because, well, what's better than exploiting the traveling pilgrims? It's easy to lose everything if you make a slip. It's a real struggle with challenges and enemies that feel impossible to overcome at the start. While Hornet is far stronger than the average bug, the game does a great job of immersing the player in the world through the various game mechanics. There are places like Underworks where the worker bug looks sickly and tired, working endlessly for meager pay under horrific conditions. And Underworks is the only place in the game where the benches are temporary. As soon as you get up from the bench, it requires payment to be used again. There's also a confessional booth in this place, where you can pay a good chunk of rosaries, and it doesn't even wait for a response from anyone. before using an automated message to call the bug in front a sinner and condemning them to days of work without rest. The conditions here are so dire that it gives the warrior princess of Hallownest class consciousness as she wonders if she paid close enough attention to how her own kingdom was run. It all just paints a picture of Pharloom being a grim and oppressive place.
Nom, Bentinom.
And we experience this world through Hornet, who is an excellently well written protagonist. Unlike the knight, she has her own distinct personality. She is stern and serious, but also empathetic.
Cadestre.
At first, she is rather on edge, helping the bugs as a way of gaining an upper hand in her own task of figuring out why she was captured by the Citadel. But soon she realizes that the ordinary bugs of Pharloom are just trying to survive and move forward. No matter how dire the situation is, someone hopes for a better future. Rebuilding no matter how much has been destroyed, revitalizing places that have long been dying, connecting pockets of survivors despite the dangers that come with it. She slowly warms to Pharloom's inhabitants. Having seen her old kingdom die in front of her, she goes out of her way to help.
Hironare.
In game, these come in the form of wishes. Wishes which have remained unfulfilled by the endless prayers of the bugs. Hornet makes her way across the vast expanse of Pharloom to get to the Citadel. Ages of stagnant decay have made much of the landscape hard to navigate normally. Hornet has to both fight the murderous locals of the areas and navigate some rough, broken terrain at the same time. There's a beguiling beauty to it all. The world is painted with these layered backgrounds that are richly detailed, that stretch far back and give the areas a real sense of depth. There's a cohesive use of distinct color palettes, lighting and effects that makes the different areas feel unique and pop. It maintains the wonder of discovering new areas where I am eternally excited to progress just to see the art of the area, while at the same time dreading what cruel and unusual punishment Team Cherry has cooked up for me this time. The areas vary from the deep greens and overgrown wilderness of Shellwood, where nature seems to have started overtaking the old roots of the Citadel, as growths of vines and plants try to hide away all traces of civilization. To the gloomy, melancholy, rain-soaked town of Greymoor, with its dark, dingy corners down and windmills spinning endlessly up top. The enemies that occupy these places also fit in sometimes expected and predictable manners, like stick insects that resemble dry branches or small flying bugs in Shellwood. But there are some bugs that have weirder and more interesting roles in this world. There are claw bugs who fly and have made the heights of Shellwood their home. But there are also silk catchers who catch the silk that floats down, silk which is paramount for the running of the Citadel. All these areas are given life by this game's soundtrack, from the serene and quietly hopeful in the newly revived Bellheart to the grand sounds that play near the edge of the world in blasted steppes. Though I do think a lot of the area tracks, however good, have a tendency to fade into the background. They work really well with the area they are in, but don't quite manage to elevate it beyond. Like for example how the music in City of Tears worked so well in Hollow Knight. but you generally won't get much time to take in the sights and sound. Making the way through most of the areas for the first time is a fairly difficult challenge. Silksong has a much higher skill floor the player is required to reach to be even somewhat comfortable playing the game. There are several things that make it so. Hornet is pretty fragile, with frequent double damage attacks from common enemies, many of which have complex and varied attack patterns. There's also more frequent platforming section with some double damage environmental obstacles. While learning the pogo, that is attacking platforming for a boost, is mandatory from very early on, unlike the first Hollow Knight, which is especially challenging because the game starts off with a hard to master diagonal pogo. Hornet starts off with nothing, not even the ability to sprint or dash, which can be a bit off-putting for newcomers, but it makes for a really satisfying experience when you get these upgrades and no longer struggle with enemies that felt impossible before. But she also quickly becomes a much more mobile protagonist. To combat these faster and smarter bugs, her movements are sharp, swift, and deadly. Hornet can sprint fast and harpoon to close distances between enemies. The combat system has seen an upgrade as well, with the new crest system allowing for a much more varied playstyle. Even early game, you have 3 radically different styles, between the slower, wider sweeps of the Reaper style crest, the lightning quick Wanderer's crest that deals insane damage with multiple quick hits but has a short range, and the balanced Hunter's crest, which comes with the aforementioned difficult to master diagonal pogo. And that's just 3 of the more basic crests in the game. And these crests can be augmented with different tools which are separated in 3 categories. Yellow tools are roughly exploration movement aids, blue tools are combat and healing aids, and red tools are limited use weapons / effects that Hornet can use to devastating effect, ranging from a sting shard to a damage and speed enhancing flea brew to small mechanical flies that follow Hornet around and deal significant damage to enemies. Different crests also have different tool slots, and you can create some good synergies with a toolset, like Wanderer's low range can be mitigated by using the long claw that increases the reach of Hornet's needle. Crests like Witch or Architect crests that have weirder effects also benefit from tool use, like the standard heal being replaced by an AoE in attack in case of the former, which can become deadlier with the searing blast of the claw mirrors, or having unlimited red tool usage via Silk in case of the latter. Then there's the way healing works in this game. It's now a high risk high reward system where you have to hit enemies 9 times to get enough Silk to bind, which heals 3 whole masks, and at the start of the game it is much more than half of Hornet's total health. The fact that Hornet can bind mid-air opens up more healing windows, but if she does get knocked out of her heal, not only does she take damage, but she also loses all her accumulated Silk, which makes surviving almost impossible. This feels better than the Hollow Knight heal system in fights. Here the attacks can be relentless, but a well-timed heal is still possible, making it feasible to make incredible comebacks from the brink of despair. And using these systems and finding synergies between different tools makes for a really fun time, and finding the right combination can really help with some hard fights. As Hornet says herself, accept the limitation of one's body and augment with tools as needed. And that just covers the combat portion. There's a significant amount of platforming which I find quite fun and an enjoyable break from the rather combat heavy sections. The platforming in Silksong also trips people up because there's a time element to a lot of the challenges in this game, and the early game requires the player to master the pogo. I won't say Silksong's platforming is easy. There are some challenging platforming gauntlets in the game. Challenging by indie Metroidvania standards, that is. By indie platformer standards, though, it's not particularly hard. In fact, despite how many people keep mentioning it in regards to any random Silksong platforming section, Hollow Knight's Path of Pain was a harder and more grueling sequence than anything in Silksong. Though I do have an actual complaint about the movement. There are two things Hornet can do after jumping: float or double jump. Now, before getting the double jump, it was easy to just float. But after getting the double jump, there's no way to trigger the float without double jumping first. It feels janky and has gotten me to take damage both in platforming and in combat. The difficulty and the mix of combat and platforming makes exploration an engaging but often tense affair. Slowly making my way through new areas without a map and no knowledge of how far away from safety I am immerses me into this world. A feeling aided by the spectacular sound design. The different sounds of Hornet walking across the varied terrain, the deep sounds of ringing the bells above the benches, voices echoing through the level, the way unstable footing snaps under our feet. And that's not even mentioning how good Hornet's attack and movement sounds. From the dash to the small metallic noise of her clinging to the wall to the sound of her pogo connecting. The environmental sounds like strong winds cutting through the land in blasted steps, or the steam flowing through the metal pipes in the exhaust organ, which almost sound like music. And the constant subtle sound of bells in Bellheart. These work well alongside sounds of the enemies, wings buzzing, small enemies skittering around, attacking in a flurry of blades. The flowers opening up are all varied and manage to scratch my brain. It cannot be overstated just the amount of satisfying sounds the game has. From the gears turning when Hornet hits a lever to the cute sounds the fleas make when she feeds them. The best of all are the songs and sounds of the NPCs, which you can sometimes hear from far away. The maps of the area are often only available after a fair bit of exploration, so when we hear Chakra singing from far away, it feels comforting to hear a friendly voice and knowing that after buying her map, we can finally make our way through the area somewhat less blindly. One of my favorite memories while playing the game is making my way through the icy heights of Mount Fae, where every second spent outside this light circle can cause a swift, frigid death. Finding the safety of a bench under the warmth of a lantern in this bitter cold while Chakra sang next to me felt immensely cozy. I have heard the exploration in this game criticized a bit for a couple reasons. For one, benches costing money. Sure, it's a problem in early game, but by the end of Act 1, if a player hasn't taken the hint and isn't carrying rosary chains, that's on the player. I have also heard that some of the hidden routes and breakable walls are a bit too obscure and require just bumping into random places. I will agree with this, but I will also say that it's a comparatively small portion items and areas that are hidden like that. For keen-eyed players, most of the exploration is possible on the road, though it does feel a bit frustrating at times. I will say there can be some disappointment with the exploration. Often obscure hidden areas and breakable walls will only have a couple rosaries or a handful of shards, which, well, let's talk about shards. Red tools themselves have a limited number of users per tool, which get replenished when you sit down on a bench. But they also consume shards. Now I get it, red tools are really powerful, and the game incentivizes you to use them more carefully, which is fine. You don't need them in general exploration. But if you are struggling in gauntlets or boss fights, the supply you accumulate can easily vanish in 20 minutes of attempts. And there are many bosses which took me double that time to beat, which means you have to go back and farm rosaries and buy shard bundles. This issue would fix itself if the enemies in Gauntlet or the bosses themselves dropped shards, which they don't for some reason, unlike all other enemies. It's just a tedious step for players who use red tools, which are generally the players who would struggle more with the game. And you can't really hoard shards in a way you can rosaries. Often while exploring you would find shards dropping from enemies or in random parts of the world while already at max capacity. In general though, I find the exploration deeply satisfying. Finding NPCs, freeing fleas, discovering useful tools and upgrades hidden around Pharloom. It's a good time opening shortcuts and finding fast travel stations. Then there's masks and spool fragments which are really useful, increasing either your health or the amount of silk you can carry. And most of all, I like discovering the story behind each of the areas in the game. All the different mechanics of the game work together to weave the narrative of an area. Bilwater, which is my favorite area of the game, is an actual nightmare to explore. It's a putrid, angry place covered by a sickly green hue. It's placed under active decay but still filled with enemies of absurd proportions, spitting glowing green blobs of liquid and filled with traps. The foul water of this place is filled with maggots which climb onto Hornet and slowly drain away her silk and prevent her from healing. And even when you seem to find rest at a bench, the ground underneath collapses into another pool of maggot infested water. All of this while an hauntingly beautiful song plays in the background. Maybe the best song in the whole entire game. A track that contrasts with the relentless hostility of this area. The story of this place is incredibly tragic. Pilewater used to be the home of the Stiltkin tribe before the Citadel started dumping the liquid waste, turning the fresh flowing water in this area into bile. It wasn't always a miserable place. It was turned into that by the Citadel, causing untold suffering to the locals of the place just for the crime of existing there. Is it any surprise that this place is so hostile and aggressive towards outsiders? So, when you find deep inside the area a message carved onto stone that says, "Their shells are ours, their souls are ours, our hate is forever," you have already felt that. And well, if you do want to get mad at an area, putrefied ducts is literally bile water without the sauce and even more annoying enemies. The thematic and narrative quality of the game reaches its pinnacle in the various boss fights. These do a great job of both capping off an area thematically and mechanically, like the fight with the last judge at the end of Act 1 near the Grand Gate in Blasted Steps. the one who stands guard and delivers judgment upon those who want to enter the Holy Citadel. Though equally often, it can just be providing a fun challenge for the players to overcome during exploration. In general, the boss fights in Silksong require a more aggressive playstyle to beat. The bosses don't give much downtime between attacks, which forces the player to dodge and attack in the same sequence without letting the boss finish their move. And they also have a ton of health, so surviving a battle of attrition with them is difficult. The bosses can range from duels against rapid enemies who show mastery of their own combat skills to fight against giant beasts who use their own bodies as a weapon, resulting in fights that are intense, frantic, and just plain fun, which makes it really satisfying overcoming these bosses. There are aspects of the bosses that has seen major criticisms as well, namely the runbacks and the additional enemies. For the former, even though there were several bosses that took me over a dozen tries, it was somewhat rare that the runback itself was an issue for me. The much maligned Lost Judge runback requires a bit of precision from the player's platforming skills, but by the fourth time, I was breezing past the enemies and it felt similarly good to doing a phase of a fight well. Not to say there aren't bad runbacks, there are some time wasters in this game, but there's only really one egregious one. Most of the other runbacks can be shortened by shortcuts or looking for a closer bench pretty frequently. The additional enemies on the other hand, I can't defend. As a phase before the fight, they're generally fine, but it can feel tedious. Shit like the exploding flies in the Broodmother fight on the other hand makes for a chaotic fight dependent on RNG that doesn't even feel good to beat. And in small arenas with bosses that have too hard contact damage, it feels especially infuriating. But that's more of an exception rather than the rule. The best bosses in the game have sublime build-up and payoff, which makes them incredibly memorable. In the middle of Act 1, as we explore Pharloom, making our way to the Citadel, we come across a tunnel built by what seems like thousands of bells stuck together. In here, a sign welcomes us into a settlement up ahead. But as soon as we step into the town, a disturbing sight greets us. Dozens of bugs strung up across the place using silk strings, unable to move as if in a haze. Hornet takes the task of breaking this curse upon herself. The source of this curse can be tracked down to the very heart of Belheart, to Widow, a weaver.
Vienta!
Weavers are a species of spiders originating in Pharloom. They can wield and weave silk, and for a time they were the ruling class of Pharloom. They are notable for their distinct masks. Widow is a weaver, but one twisted by punishment from an unknown source. Her own silk was made useless by pins lodged in her spine and her mask forcibly removed. As the fight starts, the music swells to match her frantic pace. Unable to attack with her own silk, she uses the remaining silk in Belheart to throw heavy bells at Hornet and attack her with wild, erratic swipes. After a tough fight, we manage to defeat her and restore Belhart. Silksong consistently and rather excellently uses its gameplay and presentation to reinforce its themes, with a method of storytelling that is also less vague and more emotionally resonant compared to the original Hollow Knight. That doesn't mean it's inherently a better story, it's just told differently. Hornet is a protagonist with a voice and she has actual conversations with the different NPCs, which works well in developing these various other characters. Hornet talks in a calm, formal way, but it's clear that the suffering she has seen has affected her as well. She can help the various settlements and considers it a rewarding task in and of itself. Hornet almost feels like she is duty bound to try and help this dying kingdom. The themes of religious exploitation in regards to the theocracy in the Citadel, the themes of control, free will, and motherhood are explored through several different story arcs of the various characters in Pharloom. One of the characters we meet in an obscure corner of the world is Huntress.
Hasbin?
She asks Hornet to help feed her brood, a brood that would generally feed on her own flesh as they're born into a world hungry. But she questions her role in this, wanting to not be a mother who sacrifices herself for her brood, but rather one who sees them grow. It's a great little quest about questioning the general nature of things and one's role within them. And for people willing to dig deep into the history of this place, you will see all the signs of a power struggle to control Pharloom, an autocratic structure which, even as it collapses in this conflict, makes life hell for the citizens living underneath. Whatever route is taken into the Citadel, the underworks come first. There's nothing that compares to the gilded glamour and sheer size of the Citadel in the rest of Pharloom, and it's flush with rosaries, more than you will ever get in any of the other areas. It makes sense because all the riches and resources of this land was funneled into the hands of the few up top. But even here, the Citadel itself hides some even darker secrets. There will be spoilers for the whole game ahead. Across her travels, Hornet comes across Lace several times. Lace is a being of pure silk, one of the daughters of Grandmother Silk, the higher being atop the Citadel who is the real ruler of Pharloom. Lace at first appears arrogant, presenting herself as high and mighty compared to Hornet. Lace as a character exists as the culmination of the different themes in Silksong, having been betrayed by the weavers that she had created herself and being forced to quash their rebellion. Grandmother Silk created Lace as a loyal follower, not strong enough to rebel, made dependent and given the shape of a child. Lace exists in contrast to Hornet. Hornet, who grew up with the guidance to be strong and independent, to be able to overcome the desire for ultimate control so that one day she might be strong enough so that she may craft a world that is better. Lace is pained by her existence and her assumed inferiority compared to Hornet, who she considers a true lie. Hornet fights Grandmother Silk in the cradle atop the Citadel with a plan of trapping her permanently. All this builds up to the final act of the game. Lace takes down Grandmother Silk as an act of defiance and sacrifices herself. The snare drags Grandmother Silk down to the abyss into the realm of the void, a dark power that attacks and corrupts everything in its path. But Grandmother Silk is not ready to go down that easily. Her violent resistance causes Void to climb up to the Citadel using her very own silk string as the world shakes from the death throes of this dying monarch. A wave of destruction follows this, destroying large chunks of the remaining settlements in Pharloom. Hornet partly blames herself for this condition, but remains steadfast in her convictions and maintains belief that she will be able to work for a better tomorrow. She dives into the deepest depths of the abyss to protect Pharloom and save the void corrupted lace. As the void lace strings of silk dissolve into nothing, Hornet and Lace wake up near the edge of the void lake. She has finally succeeded in protecting this kingdom. The wait for Silksong was long, so long in fact that I spent the time in between Hollow Knight and its sequel getting better acquainted with the Metroidvania genre, as Silksong seemed to approach vaporware status with almost no updates about the game. But suddenly in August 2025, a new trailer with the release date popped up and the hype was back. It was soon followed by an article by Jason Schreier, where Team Cherry co-founders Ari Gibson and William Phelan discussed the reasoning behind the long wait. It all boils down to the fact that they had enjoyed the process of making the game, and the reason it took so long is because they had cool and interesting ideas and the game's scope increased as they had fun adding them. They were a small team who spent years fine-tuning every detail of Silksong. This made me optimistic, because exploring the world for the first time in Hollow Knight was a magical feeling, and I had no doubt in my mind that it would be the same for Silksong. But Silksong turned out even better than I could have ever imagined. The several years of work that went into developing this game could be felt in almost every aspect of it. It's a stunning, detailed and varied world that connects in interesting ways. The combat system has enough depth where even after over 100 hours I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface of what's possible. There's so many unique interactions and mechanics that could be easily missed. I enjoy the new quest system and being able to help so many across Pharloom, learning about the various charming and well-written characters. And most of all, I love playing as Hornet, both because of the controls and because of her presence as the protagonist in this narrative. It's a narrative that is consistently engaging and with thematic depth that is explored in a rewarding manner. Almost every aspect of what I enjoyed in the original Hollow Knight has been enhanced and improved upon in Silksong. It is also a more challenging game for most of it. Hollow Knight's exploration had this calm, relaxing, slow-paced vibe sometimes that Silksong completely lacks. It's a different type of atmosphere, more oppressive. And as for people who want to start off with Silksong, you will miss some important details about the narrative. In terms of the gameplay, it's different enough that Hollow Knight players would have to recalibrate anyway, so it shouldn't be much harder for a newcomer. All that being said, I still recommend playing this afterwards. Silksong is one of the games that makes me delighted that gaming is one of my hobbies. It has a well executed artistic vision and it's the sort of game that makes a wait this long feel worth it. There's so much I haven't even talked about. Some of my favorite stories or fights I skipped talking about in service to brevity. It's one of the best games I have ever played.